Hi everyone, I wanted to try to do a short video of our electric fence, some things we've learned, some things we've done before in the past. So this is our Energizer. It is a solar Energizer meant for 5 miles of fence. When taking that into consideration, that is 5 miles of one line. So if you have multiple lines of fencing like here with 3 strands, you have to add all of that up. So keep that in mind when you're buying an electrifier. You know, you might only have a 30-acre farm, but if you buy a 30-acre solar charger or a plug-in one, it might not be enough because of how many strands you might have, because of cross fencing you might have. So always keep that in mind. I do prefer plug-in Energizers over solar. Solar is just not reliable. It can get covered up with snow in the winter, cloudy days, short winter days can all do things to shade cover to reduce the amount of power it has, how much battery power it has, and then that can affect your voltage on your fence and render your fence useless, and then your animals can go right through it. So this is our Energizer. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off so I don't have to worry about getting zapped while I'm doing this video. Ours does have a switch right under here, which you can't really see. There we go. Turn it this way for off, this way for on. This green knob is the grounding knob. This can come all the way off, but as you can see, we just have the wire wrapped around, and then we just take this and we put it down nice and tight. This is for the hot. It tells you right here. So with grounding, you really don't want to cut corners with grounding. Come through this fence over here. Usually if a fence isn't getting enough charge, either it's shorting out somewhere or there's not enough grounding. So we have our wire in an insulated tube. You can buy pre-insulated wire, which I suggest, because when you start getting to long lines of tubing like this, it gets almost impossible to run a wire through it. But we were working with what we had, so that's what we did. The wire that we used is a 14 gauge wire. We did originally put this up with 17 gauge. We had some issues which probably weren't related to that, but we took all the 17 gauge wire out and replaced it with 14 gauge. This is a steel rod. When you're putting up electric fence, you really want to keep all the same metal. So you don't want to be jumping back and forth between copper and steel and copper and steel and copper and steel and copper and steel. You're going to cause corrosion. You're going to ruin the longevity of your fence. You can even ruin the voltage of your fence. So it's best to stick with all the same metal. These clamps are really super handy. I highly suggest them. You can get copper clamps. They might be a bit of a different design, but same premise. This clamps down, tightens real well, and then the way the wires are held in, and it's not that the wires are wrapped around or anything, this screw tightens down on those wires, creates that connection, and holds them nice and tight. I would have to pull really, really hard to get this out. This is also on the outside of our fence, and it's also right along our fence, so we're not likely to trip over it. The horses aren't going to trip over it. They're not going to get caught in any of this. We're probably not going to get caught on any of this. You do want your grounding rod about 10 feet away from your electrifier. Between this post and this post is about 15 feet. So this is probably closer to like 12 feet from my electrifier. Not a huge difference. We did put in another grounding rod. Again, use the same clamp and everything to attach the wire. Really, you can't have too much grounding, as long as it's grounding on your grounding wire, not on your hot fence. This was one 8-foot long steel pole. The two of them, they were one. We cut it in half for a previous fencing project, but for a project as small as this is still way more grounding than we necessarily need. But you really just can't have too much. So we just went ahead and we put both in. If you were going to be doing an entire property fence, you need, like at minimum, 3 poles, 5 to 6 feet, all the way in the ground. Again, continued out pretty much just like that. If you have a very large property, you're going to want more grounding. Pretty much, if you know you have everything set up correctly and your connections are fine, and you know you're not grounding out anywhere on your hot wire, if your voltage isn't high enough, add more grounding. That's almost always going to work. Of course, if you're in a dry area or a frozen situation, it can be a little bit different. Of course, if you get your grounding rods far enough in the ground for frozen, it shouldn't really matter. Dry is a whole nother situation. I'm not going to pretend like I'm some expert on it, because I don't live in a dry area. I like having a lot of grass. My dog is eating poop. I have seen people say if you live in a dry area, you can like water your grounding rods. And they were just suggesting something as simple as dumping water on it. I've lived on the coast before with super sandy soils that drain super duper fast and dry out super duper fast. I don't see that working, because it would really only make your grounding rod useful for a very short period of time while the ground is wet. Once the ground dries out, it can cause an issue again. But I'm not going to go into suggestions about dry ground. I can't tell you. I don't live in an area like that. So then we have our hot wire, connects up here, same as over here, comes down. This is a little doohickey we found lying around. It's kind of cool, spring loaded. We can just take it right off and this whole thing will rotate around in it. You don't need something like this. You really just as easily could take this, bring it down, wrap it around. Again, insulated tube to reduce any chance of an arc and grounding out on the T-post, which is metal. Connecting here, this piece goes all the way through. So when we attach our handles, this metal piece goes all the way through to here, and then we tied our fence onto there. So when it's connected here on the top, because we only have the hot wire to the top, we don't need it to both. This will charge the whole fence. This connects to an old electric fence we have back there, so even if this side isn't connected, this side will be charged because it will come down and around and back up. We still need to add a connection between those 3 lines on that side. We just ran out of the connectors, but we're not too terribly worried about it. The horses aren't going to be on this fence line anytime soon. We're letting this pasture and this pasture grow up because most of it looks kind of like that. Just a lot of loose dirt. Well, I should say exposed dirt. Everything has really started to green up this past week, which means everything is starting to grow. The grass is starting to grow. So we're going to let all this green up. You can kind of see that the grass here is taller. That's a zone of refusal because that's where they like to poop, and they don't like to eat where they poop. But that's a story for another time. So because the horses aren't going to be on here, we're not terribly worried about connecting all 3 of those wires. 2 of them right now will still be electrified as long as this is attached. Or really, either of them are attached. That middle one right now will not be because it's not attached to anything down there. And we'll fix that in probably a few days. Insulators, you want to get nice insulators. I've taken the cheap route and they work and they don't work. This is a cap insulator for a T-post, especially because this is going to be where they could get shocked and they could just jump and react suddenly. We wanted to make sure that they weren't likely to like impale themselves. So we got that. These are actually insulators that came with the T-post because we bought these T-posts secondhand. They were already on here, but this is, you know, the same kind of insulator you would get at TSC, and that's where or King Cove, and they're all the same. We didn't do the middle wire all the way across only because handling 2 handles at a time is already a big enough pain in the butt, especially when you're handling a horse as well, and then also trying to keep another horse from following. 2 handles is enough of a pain in the butt. I didn't need 3 handles and to be fighting with that, and so I just did 2 handles, and I ended my 3rd wire here and there from going across just my gate area. And then we connected again. This is a 14 gauge wire. We insulated with tube. These are the connectors we bought. You can also make them at home. They're super easy to make. All this one is it's a flat bolt like this with this flat edge, and then it has 2 washers in it and then a nut. And then all you do is I took the wire, I looped it around this, and then I took the 14 gauge wire, made a hook, looped it around the inside, put it between the washers, tightened it down, and that holds exceptionally well. You don't, like back there where it's connecting to that fence, it connects onto another electric fence like this. We aren't using the 14 gauge wire to connect the two, but all you again do is you loop this one, and then for the one that's going across like this, we just again looped it, tightened it down, and our connections are solid, and that's not going anywhere. So we have it insulated down to this one, so the middle one gets charged, which is what we need to do over there. So really we just need one to go from there to there, or there to there, whichever. And then again, we have another piece of 14 gauge all the way down. This is not one continuous wire. They are 2 separate wires. I decided that would probably be best. I guess it doesn't really matter, but that's how I just felt that would be best. So then we come down here. Most of this on this side is T-post. Most of it over there is these old fiberglass rods. Fiberglass will ground out a wire. It's not like plastic, so they do require insulators. These are the old insulators I got off of kencove.com. The thing about these is like they move very easily up and down. So like that can be a problem. We also had this fence set up before, and in a really big windstorm it can be kind of easy with these insulators specifically for the wire to just pop out, which then if it touches that fiberglass rod, you've just grounded out your system. I did buy these insulators at Tractor Supply. I was really surprised to find a rod insulator because most of their insulators are for wooden fences or T-posts. So it was actually a big surprise to find these fiberglass insulators. They are a bit of a different design. They're sharper in these 2 pieces. We'll see if that holds a little better. It kind of seems like it will. And if these white ones become a problem, then I might just switch them out. Fiberglass rods are handy. They're also extremely hard to break. They're also not the best, but they're cheap. Each 6-foot rod was $1.80 off of kencove.com. They're 6 feet long. I put them about a foot in the ground, and then you can put those insulators anywhere. This is the first time I've used these insulated gate pieces. I really like them. I have high hopes for them. And everything works fine. So then once you have everything connected, you just come in, turn it on. You would take a voltmeter, place it on the wire, see what your voltage is. I don't know what my voltage is, but I know that without a pair of boots on, if you touch it, it'll knock you on your butt. We've done it. That's how we tested this wire, because our voltmeter isn't working. So it is really strong, really effective. If you weren't getting enough voltage, try adding another grounding rod. But so this is pretty much the basics of fencing. If I had a big fancy plug-in one that was inside my barn, I would get, and it was like charging my entire property, I would get a lightning diverter, which you would put in this setup. It's kind of pointless to have one. On this, you can go ahead and have one, but at the same time, your electrifier could get hit directly because it's outside, because it's a solar charger. So, you know, we got this on sale. If it does get fried, we're not out of too much money. So, anywho, that's your basics of electric fencing. I hope it helps you pick out the things you need. In a pinch, you can use extra twine or the electric fence wire, and you can just connect straight from the electric part to the fence. We've done that in the past. It does work. I do feel like it kind of can affect the voltage, but usually not by a whole lot. And you can do the same thing with your grounding wire. We've also done it straight from the ground to the grounding rod, and we just tied it on, and it worked. It is cutting corners. I do feel like it does affect your voltage, so if you can, stick with this. The wire itself wasn't too expensive. The tubing wasn't too expensive. Already pre-insulated electric wire isn't too expensive, so I would suggest going ahead and using this stuff, because I've had my horses behind subpar electric fence, which barely delivers. The charge doesn't go down the fence, and the horses will just literally walk through the fence. So get it right, get it set up good the first time. It'll save you a lot of heartache. Alright guys, if you like my video, hit the like button. If you think it's helpful, share it. For today, I'm signing off, and I will talk to y'all later.